Hello, I'm Lelda Smits for Australia's Finance News Network, and joining me today from Singapore is American investor and author Jim Rogers. Jim, welcome to FNN, and thanks so much for your time. Now, for the benefit of our Australian audience, why did you choose to leave your homeland and set up in Singapore?
Well, the main reason, Lelda, is that I've got two children who I want to grow up speaking perfect Mandarin. In my view, the 21st century will be the century of China. I couldn't keep up the Mandarin in New York as much as I wanted to. You know, many parents do strange things for their children. They move to near football coaches or music teachers or good schools. We moved to Singapore to maintain the Mandarin.
And why Singapore when you had all of Asia to choose from?
Well, we looked at the Chinese-speaking cities in China, but the problem is the ones where we want to live are too polluted. I love Shanghai, I love Hong Kong, but the pollution is just too horrible. Singapore is the best of all worlds.
Well, you're clearly an investor with your eyes on global horizons, but what's your outlook for global growth stepping into next year?
Well, Lelda, I'm not too optimistic about what's going to be happening in the world in the next 2 or 3 years, and maybe even longer. We have serious problems in the United States. You know, in 2002, we had an economic slowdown. 2008 was even worse because the debt was so much higher. The next time around, the debt is going to be staggeringly higher. So the problems are going to continue to get worse until somebody solves the basic underlying problem of too much spending and too much debt.
Could you elaborate on that, Jim? If you believe problems are going to get worse because of too much spending and debt, what do you believe is the biggest risk to global growth in 2012?
Well, definitely too much debt is the, in a nutshell, yes. I mean, the biggest risk, of course, is the central bank in the U.S., which keeps printing money. But they're printing all that money as a result of the debt. So we have big problems of money printing, debt, too much consumption. Be careful.
Okay, you recently returned from the States. How are folks there feeling about the economy?
I was surprised at how much optimism there is. Everybody still seems to think everything's going to be okay. I guess they've been thinking that we've all been brought up that everything would be okay in the next year or two, and it has been okay for the past 20 or 30 years. Unfortunately, I think there's false optimism, and I would have been more impressed if I'd seen a lot of depressed people, but I see optimistic people.
So if everyone is optimistic, what concerns you about the state of America's fiscal affairs?
Well, the central bank. I mean, the central bank controls monetary affairs, but the central bank keeps buying government debt, and the Congress keeps spending government money. So the combination of the federal government, including the central bank, really scare me.
But if the central bank isn't fixing things, who is responsible for fixing this dilemma?
Well, first of all, you could either abolish the central bank or tell them to put somebody in there who wouldn't print money, or the Congress could just stop spending money. Unfortunately, Lelda, that's not the way politicians work. They just worry about the next election. They want to get through the next election, and they hope they can make everything all right until after the next election. So it's Congress in the end. It's the president in the end. But are they going to do something? No, they're not going to do anything until there's a serious crisis or semi-crisis.
Well, what's holding them back then if we have the threat of an imminent crisis, as you say?
It would be horribly painful to do what's necessary. The problem, Lelda, is that the measures that America needs, and not just America, many countries, but especially America needs, would cause huge pain for a while. But, Lelda, if we don't take our pain now and we wait until the market forces the pain on us, then it's going to be, you know, a systemic collapse. It's going to be very, very, very serious pain. You're going to see riots in the streets. You're going to see serious, serious problems. Maybe perhaps war even. It's better to go ahead and take the pain now, while it would be terrible for 2 or 3 or 4 years. At least we get it behind us and start over.
Okay, so we need to take the pain, and we all know the way out of debt isn't more debt. So what's printing money going to fix, and why is this even an option?
Printing money does nothing more than buy time. Throughout history, governments have tried to debase their currency in a hope that things somehow would get better down the road. But it's always gotten out of control. The debt has gotten higher. The money printing makes people feel better for a while, but in the end, it's higher inflation, higher interest rates, and then you have serious, serious problems. Once inflation starts rising and gets out of control, it's very hard to kill it. At this time, we could still solve our problems. If you wait until inflation's out of control, then it's very hard to solve your problems.
Turning to US politics now, and the US elections are coming up in November next year. Who are you endorsing, Jim, and why?
Well, I don't even want to get into who I'm endorsing and why, because, I mean, after all, I'm just one voter, and I would probably hurt somebody if I endorse them. I mean, in America, Gary Johnson and Ron Paul seem to understand the problems that are facing America, but I'm not in the business of endorsing political candidates. As far as I'm concerned, Lelda, a pox on both of their houses.
Well, if you won't endorse a person, which policies do you favour?
Well, the only thing that we can do is to cut spending with an axe, not with an axe, with a chainsaw. I mean, we've got troops in over 100 countries around the world doing nothing but the troops aren't making enemies, but the presence of the American military is making enemies. We've got to cut spending dramatically. We've got welfare programs. We've got entitlement programs in America that are just mind-boggling. We really have to just take a chainsaw to spending of everything across the board.
Obama just pulled troops out of Iraq. Isn't that a step in the right direction?
He pulled out most of the troops from Iraq. You know, as usual, government propaganda is exactly that, government propaganda. There's still a lot of contract people there that they've kept in Iraq. But yes, that's a step in the right direction. But again, we've got troops all over the world. It's not doing us much good.
But Jim, can the budget be balanced by spending cuts alone? Shouldn't policymakers also be looking at raising taxes?
Raising taxes doesn't do any good, Lelda. And governments don't create jobs. I mean, have you ever seen the government create a new job? It's people like your company that creates jobs. That's the private sector is where you create jobs. Taking money from the people who save and invest and giving it to a bureaucrat, it's going to give the bureaucrat a job. And it's going to give a few people jobs, but that's not the way you solve the problem.
But as you mentioned, Jim, even if we get new leaders, they'll still be dealing with the same old debt situation. How confident are you that the US can even eventually get this debt situation under control?
Well, I'm not confident at all. I have absolutely no confidence at all that anything is going to be done. Even if somebody were elected, as I say, I think that the problems are so deep that when he started doing the right things, there would be staggering cries of pain and anguish. And then everybody would give up and try to go back to the old way. The only way it's going to be solved, Lelda, is a crisis or a semi-crisis.
Okay, let's turn to Europe now. European affairs certainly haven't left the headlines and continue to move markets. How effectively do you think EU leaders have addressed the region's debt?
Well, they're not solving the problem either. At least they're better than the U.S. They're not printing so much money as we are in the U.S. At least they understand the problem. They're trying to cut the spending. But Lelda, if you look at the plan for any country in Europe, you'll see they all are going to have higher debt next year and higher the year after that. Nobody in Europe yet is taking a chainsaw to their problem.
Now, I know you're not the biggest fan of ratings agencies, but we have just seen a series of warnings and downgrades. So if Germany and France do lose their top-notch credit rating, how will the bailout funds be supported?
The solution to too much debt is not more debt, not more spending. The solution is to cut spending dramatically. All these countries should lose their credit ratings. It's astonishing to me. Where have these rating agencies been? I mean, we know that they've been basically wrong for 15 or 20 years about just about everything they've done. Lelda, please don't pay. Well, you've got to because you're a journalist, but I don't pay any attention to those guys. I know they don't know what they're doing. Why bother?
While on Morning's Jim, the International Monetary Fund's chief just said that the world faces a 1930s-style depression. Would you agree?
Of course. Where's she been? I mean, what's wrong with her? Doesn't she watch FNN? I mean, for goodness sakes, if she could just know what's going on in the world around her, she would have known that long before December of 2011.
So do you believe the Eurozone and Euro currency can and will continue in its current form?
Well, that's a very good question. I own the Euro. I'm having serious questions in my own head of what to do about the Euro. I don't know if it'll continue. It certainly won't continue in its current form in 10 years, maybe even 6 or 8 years. No, that's going to change dramatically. It conceivably could come out of all this stronger if they do the right things down the road. I own the Euro. I'm very worried about the Euro. I know there are going to be changes in Europe and in the Euro, but when and how, I just don't know right now. But I do own it at the moment.
And how are we likely to see those developments play out on global markets?
Oh, we've lost 1 decade in the West, as you probably know. I mean, the American stock market is below where it was 10 or 12 years ago. So we've already lost 1 decade in the economy and in the markets. Likewise in Europe, we're going to lose at least one more decade, maybe 2 or 3. The Japanese have lost 2 decades so far. You know, the Japanese stock market is down 80%. That's 80% from where it was 21 years ago. We're going to have the same problems in the West. This is a long-running, festering problem until somebody faces reality.
Now, as an investor based in Asia, how well do you believe the region will weather the economic storms brewing in the US and Europe?
Well, I've moved to Asia. You know, here I am.
So you voted with your feet.
I voted with my feet. I'm just up the road from you, as you're just up the airline from you, as you know. No, we're here. This is where the future is. I've taught my children speak perfect Mandarin like natives. Their future is in Asia. Therefore, my future is in Asia. Asia's gonna suffer. Don't get me wrong. When the largest 2 economies in the world, Europe and the U.S., have problems, everybody's going to suffer. Asia will suffer less than the developed world.
You say Asia will suffer. Do you see signs this suffering has already begun?
Oh, of course it has. If you look at China, China's already got problems. They have inflation. They're doing their best to calm things down in China, wisely, in my view. So and then China's being hit, of course, with a slowdown in America and Europe. So no, everybody in Asia is slowing down.
And what about Chinese property prices? The latest government data from 70 Chinese cities shows the average price of Chinese property has fallen for the second straight month. Do you believe Chinese property is in a bubble, and are we witnessing the bust?
Some parts of the Chinese real estate market have been in a bubble. Certainly urban coastal real estate in China was in a bubble. That bubble has popped. How far down it has to go, I don't have a clue. Probably a lot further, because usually when bubbles pop, a lot of people get hurt. But it's not like in the U.S., where in the U.S. people were buying 4 or 5 houses with no job, no down payment, and then the banks were taking the mortgages and jigging them up even more. And China didn't have that kind of problem. You're going to see real estate developers go bankrupt in China, no question about that. But it's not going to be the end of the Chinese economy, as it was in the US, the UK, Spain, and a few other places.
Okay, Jim, so we've spoken about US and European debt and a potential Chinese slowdown. How do you see global markets reacting in 2012?
Well, I'm not optimistic for the most part about stock markets. I don't own many stocks anywhere in the world. The only offset of the caveat for me is the fact that there's an election in the US, in Spain, in France, a few other places. So whenever there are elections coming, governments spend. They throw money out the window to buy votes. So some people are going to be much better off in 2012. Is it enough to offset the world's problems? I don't think so, except in some sectors which will benefit. So for myself, I am short stocks around the world. I'm short American technology stocks. I'm short emerging market stocks. And I'm short European stocks.
And what else are you buying, Jim, and why?
Well, I own commodities, because if the world economy gets better, Lelda, then commodities will do well because of the shortages. The lucky country will continue to be lucky for a while. I own some currencies, which I mentioned. I'm worried about the currency markets. I'm short stocks. I mentioned the things that I'm short. So I anticipate problems in stock markets. If the world economy doesn't get better, you're not going to make money in stocks, but then central banks will print more money. And when they print money, Lelda, the thing to do is to own real assets.
Jim Rogers, thanks so much for your insights. We'll leave it there for now. And next, take a closer look at your investments for 2012.